You missed a spot, janitor. The words sliced through the marble atrium like broken glass. Marcus Reed's mop clattered against Italian tile as 200 guests froze mid-conversation. Above him, silhouetted against crystal chandeliers, stood Victor Hale, billionaire, empire builder, destroyer of careers. His smile was surgical, cold, the kind that announced someone's dignity was about to be dissected for sport. Marcus didn't move, didn't speak. Just knelt there while champagne glasses paused mid-air and diamond earrings caught the light of his humiliation. What none of them knew, what Victor Hale couldn't possibly comprehend as he savored this moment, was that the man on his knees wasn't beaten. He was counting. And tonight, the numbers finally added up. Before we continue, I invite you to follow this story to its final, devastating conclusion. If you enjoy what unfolds, please like this video and comment with your city so I can see how far Marcus Reed's truth travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. 3 months earlier, Marcus Reed had walked through the service entrance of Hale Industries headquarters, carrying nothing but a borrowed janitorial uniform and 15 years of buried rage. The uniform was 2 sizes too large. The name tag read Mike. He didn't correct it. The operations manager, a thin woman named Rita with tired eyes and coffee breath, barely glanced at his forged references before handing him a supply cart. Third shift, floors 12 through 37, bathrooms, conference rooms, executive suites. You don't talk to anyone above floor 10 unless they talk to you first. You don't use the main elevators. You don't make eye contact with board members. Understood, Marcus said quietly. Good. Rita pulled out a laminated badge with his photo and that wrong name. Most people don't last a month. The executives here, she paused, choosing her words carefully. They treat the cleaning staff like furniture. Invisible furniture they occasionally yell at. Marcus clipped the badge to his chest. I can handle it. Rita's expression suggested she'd heard that before, from people who'd quit by morning. Clock in by 11. Alvarez will show you the supply closets. Keep your head down and you'll be fine. He already knew where the supply closets were, knew the building's layout better than the architects who'd designed it, knew which conference rooms had the best acoustics for private conversations, which executive suites had camera blind spots, which server rooms required biometric access. Marcus had spent the last 14 months memorizing every detail of the building he'd once helped design. Alvarez was a stocky man in his 50s who'd worked night shift for 12 years. He showed Marcus the industrial cleaning equipment with the resigned patience of someone who'd trained countless replacements. The vacuum sounds like a jet engine, but it's the only one that works. These floors, he gestured at the gleaming marble, they want them perfect. Mirror shine. You'll go through 3 bottles of polish a night. Who checks the work? Marcus asked. Nobody checks, but everybody complains. Alvarez pulled out a bottle of heavy-duty cleaner. Executives leave their trash everywhere. Coffee cups, takeout containers, sometimes worse. Last month I found a half-eaten lobster in a conference room trash can, not even wrapped, just sitting there rotting for 3 days. Marcus nodded, filing the information away. What about the upper floors? 25 through 37? Alvarez's expression darkened. That's executive country. The CEO's office is on 37. You'll rarely see him. Victor Hale doesn't work night shift hours, but his people do. Lawyers, accountants, the strategy team. They work late, treat you like you're deaf and invisible. He paused. Which is exactly what you want to be up there. Trust me. Noted. One more thing, or Alvarez's voice dropped. If you see a tall guy, silver hair, expensive suit, looks like he owns the world, that's Hale. If he's here late, stay out of his way. Don't talk to him. Don't look at him. Just clean and move on. Marcus's hands tightened on the mop handle. What if he talks to me? Then you say yes, sir, and do whatever he asks. Alvarez met his eyes. I've seen him fire people for less than eye contact. Security escorts them out within minutes. So unless you need this job, I need it, Marcus said evenly. He needed it more than Alvarez could possibly understand. That first night, Marcus worked floors 12 through 20 in mechanical silence. He emptied trash bins filled with discarded reports marked confidential. He mopped conference rooms where whiteboards still displayed acquisition strategies and market projections. He cleaned bathrooms where executives' cologne lingered in air thick with arrogance, and he listened. The lawyers on 18 were worried about an SEC investigation, something about offshore accounts and creative bookkeeping. They spoke freely around him, as if his presence nullified sound itself. The marketing team on 22 was panicking about a product launch. Production delays, quality control failures. A vice president named Steinberg had threatened to throw someone under the bus if the quarterly numbers disappointed investors. The strategy group on 29 discussed layoffs. 700 positions. They debated the optics, the timing, the PR spin. One woman suggested announcing it the day before Christmas. "News cycle will bury it," she'd said, sipping her third espresso. Marcus absorbed it all. Every careless conversation, every assumption that the man pushing the cleaning cart was too stupid, too irrelevant, too beneath them to matter. On floor 37, he moved with careful precision. The executive suite was exactly as he remembered. Corner offices with floor-to-ceiling windows, conference rooms with custom furniture and original artwork. The air itself seemed more refined here, filtered and temperature-controlled to uncomfortable perfection. Victor Hale's office dominated the northwest corner. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see the polished desk, the leather chairs, the portrait of Hale shaking hands with 3 different presidents. He didn't linger, not yet, but he noted the security camera positions, the keycard readers, the biometric scanner outside Hale's private elevator, details he'd need when the time came. 15 minutes before his shift ended, Marcus was finishing the floor polish on the 37th floor corridor when he heard the elevator chime. He kept his back turned, working the buffer in steady overlapping passes. Footsteps approached. Expensive shoes on marble, the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. "You there?" The voice was clipped, imperious, familiar in a way that made Marcus's jaw tighten. He turned slowly. Victor Hale stood 6 feet away, phone in one hand, briefcase in the other. He was taller than Marcus remembered, more silver in his hair. But the eyes were the same, cold, calculating, utterly certain of their own superiority. Hale barely glanced at him. "The bathroom in my office. Someone left water all over the counter. Clean it up." Marcus nodded once. "Yes, sir." "Now." Hale was already walking away, phone pressed to his ear. "And don't touch anything on my desk. Last janitor thought he could straighten my papers. He was unemployed by morning." The office door clicked shut behind him. Marcus stood there, buffer still running, 15 years of memories crashing over him like freezing water. The last time he'd been in that office, his name had been on the door. Not as a janitor, as a co-founder. The memories came in fragments. Sharp, unwanted. 14 years ago. A cramped garage in Palo Alto. Marcus and Victor bent over laptops, surviving on ramen and venture capital dreams. Marcus writing code that would revolutionize data security. Victor handling investors, contracts, business strategy. Equal partners. Or so the paperwork claimed. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday. Marcus had solved an encryption problem that had stumped the industry for years. Victor had opened champagne. They'd celebrated until dawn, already planning the company that would make them both legends. "We're going to change everything," Victor had said, refilling Marcus's glass. "You and me. This is just the beginning." The patents were filed under both their names. The company incorporated as a true partnership, 50-50 ownership, complete transparency. For 18 months it worked. Hale Industries grew faster than either of them anticipated. The security software Marcus designed became essential infrastructure for Fortune 500 companies. Revenue exploded. Investors circled. The garage gave way to a proper office, then a building, then a campus. And somewhere in that expansion, Victor Hale started rewriting history. It began subtly. Victor taking meetings alone. Victor speaking to the press while Marcus focused on product development. Victor's name appearing first in articles, then appearing alone. "You're the genius," Victor had told him. "I'm just the face. Better this way. You hate public speaking anyway." Marcus had believed him, had trusted him. The betrayal came during the Series B funding round. Marcus found the documents by accident. New corporate bylaws buried in a stack of paperwork Victor claimed was routine. Ownership restructured. Marcus's equity diluted from 50% to 12%. Victor's stake increased to 73%. The remaining 15% distributed to new investors who'd received shares Marcus never authorized. "It's just paperwork," Victor had said when confronted. "Your equity is still valuable. You're still a founder. This is about voting rights, governance structure, boring legal stuff. Don't worry about it." But Marcus had worried, had hired a lawyer, had discovered that the new bylaws gave Victor unilateral control, the power to make decisions without Marcus's input, the authority to remove him from leadership positions. The argument that followed had been apocalyptic. Marcus demanded the original agreement be honored. Victor called him naive, ungrateful, said he was holding back the company's growth with his idealism and paranoia. "I built this company," Victor had shouted. "Your code is brilliant, but I made it profitable. I brought in the investors. I created the market strategy. You want to be equal? Then do equal work." "Oh, I wrote the software that makes this company exist," Marcus shot back. "Without my encryption algorithms, you have nothing to sell. Without my business acumen, your algorithms would be rotting in some academic journal nobody reads." Victor's expression had gone cold. "You're a coder, a very good coder, but this company needs more than good code." The board meeting happened 3 weeks later. Marcus walked in expecting discussion, walked out with nothing. Victor had spent those 3 weeks carefully positioning the narrative, talking to investors, planting seeds of doubt, suggesting that Marcus was difficult, unreliable, potentially unstable, that his demands for control were jeopardizing partnerships and future funding. When the vote came, it was unanimous. Marcus Reed was removed from all operational positions, stripped of his titles, relegated to a consultancy role with no authority and shrinking equity. "It's best for the company," the board chairman had said, not meeting Marcus's eyes. "We appreciate your contributions, but we need unified leadership moving forward." Marcus had looked at Victor across the conference table, waited for him to object, to defend their partnership, to remember the garage, the champagne, the promises. Victor had smiled, sympathetically, regretfully. "I'm sorry it came to this," he'd said, "but you understand, it's business." That was the moment Marcus understood the truth. Victor Hale hadn't made a mistake, hadn't gotten carried away by success. He'd planned this. From the beginning, had seen Marcus's brilliance as something to exploit, extract, and discard. The lawsuit came next. Marcus fighting to reclaim what he'd built. His lawyers confident. The evidence seemingly clear: original patents, founding documents, email trails proving his central role in the company's creation. But Victor had money, and money bought better lawyers. Lawyers who found technicalities, who argued that Marcus's contributions were work for hire, despite the partnership agreement, who painted him as a disgruntled employee trying to extort a successful company. The case dragged on for 2 years, burned through Marcus's savings, destroyed his reputation in the industry. Other companies wouldn't touch him. Nobody wanted to hire the guy suing his former partner. When the settlement came, it was insulting, a fraction of what Marcus was owed. Enough to survive on, not enough to rebuild. And a non-disclosure agreement that prevented him from ever publicly discussing what Victor had done. Marcus had signed it because his lawyer advised him he'd lose everything if he didn't. Then he'd spent the next 12 years watching Victor Hale become a billionaire using the technology Marcus had invented. Watching Hale Industries expand globally. Watching Victor collect awards, appear on magazine covers, give TED Talks about innovation and entrepreneurship. Watching his own name disappear from the story entirely. Until 14 months ago, when Marcus decided disappeared didn't mean defeated. Now, standing in Victor Hale's office with a mop in his hand and a fake name on his badge, Marcus methodically cleaned the bathroom counter. The office looked different from this angle. Smaller, less impressive. Or maybe he'd just grown beyond being impressed. Hale was on the phone in his chair, back turned, complaining about a supplier who'd missed a delivery deadline. His voice carried that particular tone of irritation reserved for people he considered incompetent. Marcus finished the counter, checked the floor, emptied the small trash can under the sink. One piece of paper caught his attention, crumpled but not fully obscured. A memo marked "Strictly Confidential, Board Eyes Only." He palmed it smoothly, tucking it into his cleaning cart under a stack of trash bags. "You done?" Hale called without turning around. Yes, sir. Then get out and tell whoever's in charge of hiring that I want people who actually know how to clean. This bathroom's been streaked for a week. Marcus bit down on his response, nodded to the back of Hale's head. Yes, sir. He wheeled the cart out, pace steady, expression neutral, but his heart was hammering, because that crumpled memo contained exactly what he'd been waiting for. Proof. The next 3 weeks established a pattern. Marcus worked his shift with mechanical efficiency. Cleaned floors, emptied trash, remained invisible. Listened to careless conversations and collected discarded documents that executives assumed were irrelevant once they hit the trash bin. He learned that Hale Industries was more fragile than its stock price suggested. The SEC investigation Alvarez's lawyer friends had mentioned was serious. Something about foreign contracts and money disappearing into shell companies. The legal team was scrambling to bury it before it reached public scrutiny. The mass layoffs were scheduled for January 15th, 712 employees. The PR team had already prepared the press release. Strategic restructuring to maximize shareholder value. And buried in a draft email he'd recovered from a senior vice president's trash can, Marcus found confirmation of what he'd long suspected. Victor Hale had used Marcus's original security algorithms as the foundation for a new product line, without proper licensing, without acknowledgement, and definitely without compensation. In any other industry, that would be called theft. In Silicon Valley, they called it aggressive innovation. Marcus photographed everything, uploaded it to encrypted cloud storage, built his case piece by piece. But evidence alone wasn't enough. He needed the perfect moment, the kind of public exposure that couldn't be buried by lawyers or spin doctors. That moment came on a Thursday. Hale Industries was hosting its annual gala. 500 guests, investors, board members, politicians, journalists, a celebration of the company's record-breaking year. The event was held in the building's main atrium, the same space Marcus cleaned every night. He wasn't scheduled to work the gala, but he volunteered. Rita looked skeptical. You sure? These events are intense. The guests treat staff like we're part of the furniture, and Hale himself will be there. I've seen him humiliate people just for standing in the wrong place. I can handle it, Marcus said. She assigned him to floor maintenance, spot cleaning, handling spills, staying invisible in the background while the powerful celebrated themselves. Marcus arrived 2 hours before the event started, helped set up, positioned cleaning stations strategically, and waited. The gala began at 7. By 8, the atrium was packed. Crystal chandeliers blazed overhead. A string quartet played Vivaldi. Champagne flowed from fountains sculpted like the Hale Industries logo. Victor Hale stood at the center of it all, holding court in a custom tuxedo that probably cost more than Marcus's car. He laughed at jokes that weren't funny, shook hands with senators, posed for photographs with his arm around executives who smiled like their careers depended on his approval. Because they did. Marcus stayed on the periphery, mop and bucket ready, watching. At 8:40, someone spilled red wine on the marble near the main staircase. Janitor! A woman's voice, sharp with irritation. Can someone clean this up? It's spreading. Marcus moved smoothly, bucket in hand, knelt down, started blotting the wine while hundreds of guests continued their conversations around him. Invisible. Exactly where he needed to be. He was halfway through the cleanup when he heard Victor Hale's voice approaching. Absolutely unacceptable. I don't care what the production team says. We promised delivery by the end of Q4. Marcus kept his head down, working methodically. Hale's group stopped directly beside him. 4 men in expensive suits, all nodding along to Hale's complaint about supplier incompetence. One of them stepped back, directly into Marcus's bucket. The soapy water splashed across the marble, across Marcus's uniform, across the man's $1,000 shoes. Jesus! The man jumped back. Watch where you put your equipment. Marcus straightened slowly. My apologies, sir. You're blocking the entire walkway. The man's face had gone red. What kind of idiot sets up in the middle of traffic? I was cleaning the spill, sir. Someone requested. I don't care what someone requested. Victor Hale's voice cut through the noise like a blade. The conversation around them died. Guests turned. Suddenly the spill, the janitor, The confrontation became the evening's entertainment. Hale looked at Marcus for the first time with actual attention. His eyes were cold, assessing, finding someone beneath his notice and deciding to notice them anyway. "You're the same janitor from my office," Hale said. Not a question. "The one who can't clean a bathroom properly." Marcus met his gaze. Held it. "Yes, sir." Something flickered in Hale's expression. Surprise, maybe, that a janitor would dare look him in the eye. Then amusement. "You know what your problem is?" Hale's voice carried across the atrium. Guests were definitely watching now. "You people don't understand attention to detail. You do the minimum, half-ass everything, then act surprised when you can't hold down a job." "I apologize for the spill, sir." Marcus kept his voice level. "If you'll give me one moment, I'll give you a lesson instead." Hale stepped closer. "When you're in the presence of people who actually matter, you make yourself scarce. You don't obstruct. You don't create problems. You certainly don't make messes that force important people to walk around you." The atrium had gone completely silent. Marcus could feel 200 pairs of eyes on him, could see phones coming out of pockets, could sense the moment crystallizing into exactly what he needed. "Understood, sir," he said quietly. "I don't think you do." Hale's smile was surgical. "So let me make this crystal clear. You missed a spot, janitor." He gestured at the wine stain. Marcus looked down at the marble. The stain was already cleaned, the floor gleaming wet where he'd just scrubbed it. "Sir, I've already—" "You missed a spot," Hale repeated louder. "So get on your knees and clean it properly, or get out of my building." The silence was absolute. Marcus could walk away, should walk away, could file this away with all the other humiliations and wait for a better moment. But sometimes the perfect moment isn't the one you plan, it's the one you're given. Marcus lowered himself to his knees. The marble was cold, hard, unforgiving. He picked up his cleaning rag, met Victor Hale's eyes one more time, and in that moment, Victor Hale made his fatal mistake. He smiled, not just satisfied, victorious. The expression of a man who'd won, who'd put someone in their place and enjoyed every second of it. That smile was going to cost him everything. Marcus began to clean the already spotless floor. Above him, Victor Hale turned back to his companions, already moving on. The entertainment over. The janitor properly humiliated. But as Marcus worked, his mind was racing through the next 72 hours, through the evidence he'd collected, the documents he'd photographed, the testimony he'd prepared, through the one piece of information Victor Hale didn't know. That this wasn't a janitor on his knees. This was a co-founder who'd just been given the most valuable thing in the world. A billionaire's public arrogance captured on a dozen phones, and a reason to use everything he knew. Marcus finished cleaning the invisible spot, stood, picked up his bucket. Nobody was looking at him anymore. Perfect. He walked toward the service exit, pace steady, expression unchanged. Behind him, the gala continued. Champagne flowed. Victor Hale laughed at another joke, and Marcus Reed started counting. 72 hours. That's all he needed. Thought. The next morning, Marcus didn't show up for his shift. Rita called twice, left concerned voicemails. He didn't respond. Instead, he sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks from Hale Industries headquarters and made a series of very specific phone calls. The first was to Sarah Chen, an investigative journalist who'd been trying to break into the tech industry corruption beat for 2 years. She answered on the 3rd ring. "This is Chen." "Ms. Chen, my name is Marcus Reed. I have documented evidence of corporate fraud, theft of intellectual property, and securities violations at Hale Industries. Are you interested?" Silence. Then, "This is a joke, right? Someone put you up to this?" "I'm sending you 3 documents right now. Preview material. If you want the full picture, we meet in person, today." He hung up before she could respond, sent the emails. His phone rang 30 seconds later. "Where and when?" Chen said. The second call was to his lawyer, the one who'd handled his original case and lost, who'd advised him to take the settlement and move on. "David, it's Marcus. I need you to file an emergency motion. Today." "Marcus?" David Brennan sounded confused. "File what?" "We settled your case 12 years ago. The NDA prevents me from discussing it publicly. doesn't prevent me from filing a new lawsuit with new evidence. Marcus pulled up the photographs on his laptop. I'm emailing you documentation of ongoing intellectual property theft. Hale's been using my original algorithms without license for a product line that generated $400 million in revenue last year alone. That would be, David's voice shifted, became focused. That would be massive. But the statute of limitations doesn't apply to ongoing violations. He's still using the code, still profiting, still claiming it as proprietary Hale Industries technology. A long pause. Marcus, if you're wrong about this, I'm not wrong. I've been inside the building for 3 months. I have evidence you couldn't get during discovery. I have testimony from current employees. I have internal memos acknowledging the original source code. Another pause. Longer. How did you get inside? I took a job as a janitor. David started laughing, couldn't help himself. You worked as a janitor in your own company? Former company, and yes. That's either brilliant or insane. It's both. Will you file? Send me everything. I'll have the motion ready by end of business today. The third call was to the SEC. Marcus had debated this one for weeks. The SEC moves slowly. Their investigations could take years, but he had specific names, specific evidence, specific violations that wouldn't just embarrass Hale Industries, they'd trigger criminal inquiries. He spoke to a junior analyst who sounded bored until Marcus mentioned offshore accounts and falsified earnings reports. Then he was transferred, and transferred again. By the fourth transfer, he was speaking to someone who introduced herself as senior investigator Melissa Rourke. Mr. Reed, I'm going to need you to come in for a formal statement. I can do better than a statement. I can give you documentary evidence of systematic fraud going back 6 years. That's a serious allegation. And I have serious proof. By noon, the machinery was in motion. Sarah Chen had agreed to meet at 2 p.m. David Brennan had the emergency motion drafted and was filing it with the court. The SEC had scheduled Marcus for a formal interview the following morning. Marcus sat in the coffee shop and allowed himself one moment of satisfaction. Then he opened his laptop and started writing. Not a legal document, not a press release, a timeline. Every interaction with Victor Hale, every broken promise, every stolen innovation, every humiliation, every moment of the 15-year journey from partner to ghost to janitor to whatever he was about to become. He wrote until his coffee went cold, until the afternoon light shifted through the windows, until the words on the screen became a map of betrayal so detailed it could guide someone through every circle of corporate hell. At 1:45, he closed the laptop, walked 3 blocks to the address Sarah Chen had provided. She was waiting in a booth at the back, laptop open, recorder ready. Mid-30s, sharp eyes, the look of someone who'd been chasing impossible stories long enough to smell the real ones. Marcus Reed, she said as he sat down. I looked you up. You used to be somebody. I still am somebody. Fair enough. She tapped her recorder. This is on the record unless you specify otherwise, and I need to verify everything you tell me independently. Clear? Clear. Then let's start with the obvious question. You sent me internal Hale Industries documents marked confidential, documents that reference offshore accounts, falsified reports, and systematic fraud. How did you get them? Marcus smiled. I found them in the trash. The trash. Executive trash, specifically. Turns out people don't shred as carefully as they should when they assume the person emptying their bins can't read. Sarah's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. You worked there. For 3 months, night shift janitorial. You infiltrated Hale Industries as a janitor. I took an available position under an assumed name and collected evidence of ongoing crimes. She paused. That's either going to be the story of the year or a spectacular lawsuit against you personally. It's going to be both. Marcus pulled out his phone, opened the encrypted folder. What I sent you was the preview. Here's the full collection. 47 documents, emails, memos, financial records, all recovered from executive trash bins over 12 weeks. He slid the phone across the table. Sarah scrolled in silence. Her expression shifted from skeptical to focused to something like awe. She looked up. If this is authentic, this is Enron-level fraud. It's authentic. I'll need to verify. I have names, witnesses, employees who'll talk if they have protection. And I have one more thing. Marcus pulled up the video from the gala. Victor Hale publicly humiliating a janitor in front of 200 guests. That janitor was me. And those guests included 3 board members, 2 senators, and 4 journalists. Sarah watched the video twice. The second time, she smiled. He has no idea, does he, who you really are? Not yet. When does he find out? Tomorrow. When the emergency motion hits the court. When your story goes live. When the SEC announces their investigation. Marcus took his phone back. I need you to publish by end of day tomorrow. Can you do that? If I can verify enough of this, yes. Sarah closed her laptop. But I need to know something first. Why now? You've had 15 years to expose him. Why come back as a janitor? Why the dramatic reveal? Marcus leaned back, thought about Victor's smile, about the cold marble under his knees, about 15 years of invisibility. Because I wanted him to do exactly what he did at that gala. I wanted him to show the world who he really is when he thinks nobody important is watching. He met Sarah's eyes. Rich men can survive financial scandals. They hire lawyers, spin stories, spread money around until the problem goes away. But they can't survive being revealed as fundamentally cruel, as someone who humiliates people for sport. That sticks. Sarah nodded slowly. Revenge. Justice, Marcus corrected. Revenge is personal. This is about making sure he can't do to anyone else what he did to me. And if you destroy him completely in the process, then he'll know exactly how it feels. The emergency motion was filed at 4:47 p.m. Marcus Reed v. Hale Industries, ongoing intellectual property theft, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraudulent misrepresentation. The filing included exhibits. Detailed technical analysis proving the current Hale Industries security software was built on Marcus's original algorithms. Internal documents acknowledging the code's origins. Revenue figures showing the massive profits generated by stolen work. David called at 5:15. It's done. And Marcus? This is going to be nuclear. I've never filed a case with this much ammunition. How long until Hale knows? His legal team will have it within the hour. They'll call him immediately. Good. At 6:30, Sarah Chen's story went live. The Invisible Founder. How Victor Hale built an empire on stolen code and crushed the man who created it. The article was devastating. Sarah had verified enough to publish the core claims, the theft of Marcus's algorithms, the manipulated equity agreements, the systematic erasure of a co-founder's contributions. And embedded in the center of the article, video footage of Victor Hale forcing a janitor to clean an already spotless floor while 200 guests watched. The caption read, "The janitor in this video is Marcus Reed, co-founder of Hale Industries." Within an hour, the video had been shared 18,000 times. By nightfall, it was trending on 3 platforms. The SEC announced their investigation at 8 p.m. The Securities and Exchange Commission has opened a formal inquiry into financial practices at Hale Industries, following evidence of potentially fraudulent accounting and offshore transactions. Marcus watched it all from his apartment, tracked the social media explosion, read the comments on Sarah's article, watched the story spread from tech blogs to mainstream news. At 9:30 p.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Marcus Reed. The voice was tight, barely controlled. This is Victor Hale. Marcus smiled, closed his eyes. Hello, Victor. 15 years. Worth every second. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for 3 seconds. 4. 5. Marcus could hear Victor Hale breathing. Could picture him in that corner office, 37 floors above the city, surrounded by awards and accolades built on stolen work. You have 10 seconds to explain what the hell you think you're doing, Victor finally said. His voice was ice, the kind of cold that preceded violence in boardrooms instead of back alleys. Marcus walked to his window, looked out at the skyline. Somewhere in that landscape of glass and steel, Victor Hale was realizing his empire had cracks. I'm doing exactly what you taught me, Victor. I'm maximizing value, being aggressive, taking what's mine. What's yours? The word came out like a gunshot. You signed away your claims 12 years ago. The settlement was final. The NDA prevents me from publicly discussing our original dispute. Doesn't say anything about filing new lawsuits for ongoing theft. Marcus kept his voice conversational. Easy. Your legal team really should have been more thorough. But then again, you probably assumed I'd stay buried. You worked in my building as a janitor. Victor's laugh was sharp, bitter. You scrubbed toilets for 3 months just to what? Dig through trash? That's not strategy, Marcus. That's pathetic. Pathetic is humiliating someone on their knees in front of 200 witnesses. Tell me, Victor, did you enjoy it? That moment when you made me clean a spotless floor? Another silence, longer this time. You set me up. I gave you an opportunity to show who you really are. You took it. Marcus sat down. The video's been viewed 40,000 times in the last hour. Comments are running about 95% against you. Turns out people don't like watching billionaires humiliate janitors, especially when that janitor turns out to be a co-founder you erased. This is extortion. This is exposure. There's a difference. I will bury you. Victor's voice dropped to something cold and final. I have lawyers who will shred this lawsuit before it reaches discovery. I have PR teams who will destroy your credibility. I have resources you can't even imagine. By the time I'm done, nobody will believe a word you say. Marcus smiled. That's exactly what you said 14 years ago, right before you took my company. How'd that work out for you? It worked out perfectly. I built Hale Industries into a $7 billion empire. You built nothing. You disappeared. And now you're trying to claw back relevance by playing victim. Victor paused. Nobody's going to care, Marcus. You're yesterday's news. Then why are you calling? The question landed like a blade. Victor didn't answer immediately. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted, calculating now. The voice of a man who'd negotiated his way out of problems before. What do you want? I want what you stole. My equity. My credit. My company. That's not going to happen. Then I guess we'll let the courts decide. And the SEC. And the investors who are probably calling your board members right now, asking why nobody told them the company's core technology is built on stolen code. The board knows I built this company from nothing. You built it from my algorithms, and I can prove it, line by line, function by function. I have the original source code, Victor. The code I wrote in that garage before you decided one founder was easier to control than two. Victor's breathing had changed. Faster, shallow. Marcus continued, voice steady. I also have internal memos from your senior engineers acknowledging they're using legacy read protocols. I have emails where your CTO asks about modifying the original read encryption for new products. I have documentation proving every major security feature Hale Industries sells is built on technology you claimed as your own invention. Modified technology. Improved technology. We built on your foundation. Without license, without compensation, without acknowledgement. That's called theft, Victor, and it's been generating hundreds of millions in revenue for 6 years. The line went quiet again. Marcus could almost hear the calculations happening. Victor weighing options, measuring exposure, trying to find the angle, the leverage, the way to turn this around. How much? Victor said finally. Excuse me? How much to make this go away? Name your price, we settle quietly. You sign a new NDA. This lawsuit disappears. The video gets buried. We both move on. Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. You think this is about money? Everything's about money. Not this. This is about watching you explain to your board why the company's valuation is about to drop 40%. This is about watching you give depositions where you have to admit, under oath, that you built your empire on someone else's genius. This is about making sure the world knows that Victor Hale isn't a visionary. He's a thief who got lucky. You sanctimonious... Victor caught himself. You want to destroy me. I want you to feel what I felt when you took my company, when you erased my name, when you made me invisible. Marcus stood. But mostly, Victor, I want you to understand something fundamental. You didn't win. You cheated, and eventually cheaters get caught. This isn't over. You're right. It's just beginning. Sleep well, Victor. Marcus hung up. His hands were shaking. Adrenaline and 15 years of compressed rage finally finding release. He set the phone down carefully, walked to the bathroom, splashed cold water on his face. In the mirror, he barely recognized himself. The last 3 months had aged him, or maybe just revealed the age that was already there, hidden under the careful neutrality he'd maintained as Mike the janitor. His phone buzzed. Text from David Brennan. Hale's lawyers just requested emergency conference with judge. Trying to get motion dismissed. Hearing scheduled for Monday 9 a.m. This is going to move fast. Marcus typed back, good. Let it move. Another text. Sarah Chen this time. Stories exploding. 3 major outlets picked it up. 2 senators calling for investigation. Stock dropped 8% in after-hours trading. You available for follow-up interview tomorrow? Marcus. Morning only. I have SEC interview at 2 p.m. Sarah. Perfect. My office, 10 a.m.? Marcus. See you there. He set the phone down. Allowed himself exactly 60 seconds to feel the satisfaction of watching Victor Hale's world start to crack. Then he opened his laptop and got back to work. Because momentum was everything. And he'd learned from the best, from Victor himself, that you don't give your opponent time to recover. You press, you escalate, you finish it. The next morning started at 6 a.m. with Marcus's face on the front page of the business section, not buried in the tech coverage, not relegated to online only, actual front page of the print edition. Tech Founder's Revenge, the janitor who would be king. The article was more balanced than Sarah's piece, interviewed legal experts who called the case unprecedented and potentially devastating. Quoted former Hale Industries employees who remembered Marcus from the early days. Included a statement from Victor Hale's PR team calling the lawsuit baseless, and Marcus a disgruntled former consultant seeking attention. But it also included that video, and a side-by-side comparison of Marcus's original code and current Hale Industries software that made the theft visually obvious even to non-programmers. Marcus read it twice over coffee that tasted like victory and gasoline. At 8 a.m., his phone started ringing. Reporters, bloggers, tech industry analysts wanting comments. He ignored them all except for 3 calls. One from David. The judge denied Hale's dismissal motion. We're going to discovery. They're panicking. One from his mother, who'd seen the news and wanted to make sure he was safe. Baby, I'm proud of you, but please be careful. Men like that don't lose gracefully. And one from a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. Mr. Reed? The voice was professional, female, unfamiliar. My name is Jennifer Park. I'm on the board of directors at Hale Industries. I was hoping we could speak privately. Marcus walked to his window. I'm listening. Not over the phone. In person. Today, if possible. Why would a Hale Industries board member want to meet with me? A pause. Because some of us have questions about what we've been told, and some of us would like to hear your side directly. My side is in the lawsuit and the SEC filing, and about 47 internal documents your executives thought were safely in the trash. Mr. Reed, I've been on this board for 6 years. In that time, I've asked Victor Hale repeatedly about the company's technical origins, about the founding team, about the original architecture. Her voice hardened slightly. I was told you were a junior developer who left voluntarily, that your contributions were minimal, that the core technology was entirely Victor's creation. And now? Now I'm looking at source code comparisons that suggest I've been lied to for 6 years. So I'm asking, will you meet with me or not? Marcus checked the time. I have an interview at 10, SEC at 2. I can do noon. Noon works. There's a cafe on Madison, 2 blocks from... I know the one. I'll be there. He hung up before she could say anything else. A board member, reaching out directly. That was either a genuine crisis of conscience or a very sophisticated attempt to gather intelligence for Hale's defense. Marcus was betting on 50-50 odds. But he'd take the meeting either way. Sarah Chen's office was exactly what Marcus expected. Cramped. Papers everywhere. 3 computer monitors displaying different news feeds. Coffee cups in various stages of abandoned. Sarah looked like she hadn't slept. You're trending on 4 platforms. The video's at 2 million views, and I have 6 other outlets asking if I'll share sources. Don't! Wasn't planning on it. She gestured to a chair. Sit. We have 45 minutes before I need to file my follow-up piece. The interview was rapid fire. Sarah pushed hard on the ethics of working undercover, on the legality of collecting documents from trash, on whether this was justice or just elaborate revenge. Marcus answered honestly. It's both. I wanted justice. I also wanted Victor Hale to know what it feels like to be erased. If that makes me vindictive, fine, I can live with that. Some people are calling you a hero. Others are saying you're as bad as Hale, that you manipulated your way into the building under false pretenses. I took an available job using a name that wasn't on any blacklist. I cleaned floors. I collected evidence of ongoing crimes. If that's manipulation, then every undercover investigation in history is unethical. Fair point. Sarah made notes. What happens if you win? If the courts give you back your equity, your credit, everything, what then? Marcus hadn't let himself think that far ahead. But the answer came easily. I rebuild. Properly this time. With transparency. With partners I can actually trust. And I make sure Victor Hale never has the power to do this to anyone else. That's ambitious. So was infiltrating my own company as a janitor? Sarah smiled. One last question. That moment at the gala, when Hale made you clean the floor, what were you thinking? Marcus remembered the cold marble, the weight of 200 stairs, Victor's smile. I was thinking that he'd just given me exactly what I needed, proof that he hasn't changed, that underneath the philanthropy and the TED Talks and the Innovation Awards, he's still the same man who stole my company, still someone who sees other people as beneath him. He met Sarah's eyes, and I was thinking that this time the cameras were rolling. The cafe on Madison was small, quiet, the kind of place where conversations could happen without interruption. Jennifer Park was already there when Marcus arrived. Mid-50s, silver hair, cut sharp, the kind of professional presence that suggested she'd survived boardrooms by being smarter than everyone else. She didn't offer her hand, just gestured to the seat across from her. Thank you for coming. Marcus sat, ordered coffee he didn't need. You have 15 minutes. I have an SEC interview at 2 and I can't be late. Then I'll be direct. The board held an emergency session last night. Victor presented your lawsuit as a nuisance claim, assured us it was baseless, told us you were a disgruntled former employee trying to extort the company. She paused. Then 3 of us independently reviewed the technical documentation you provided to that journalist, the source code comparisons. And unless Victor has an explanation that somehow escaped 6 years of technical reviews, it appears our core security platform is built on stolen intellectual property. Her expression was carved from ice, which means the board has been exposing the company and ourselves personally to massive liability. Marcus sipped his coffee. You're worried about being sued. I'm worried about fiduciary duty. If we knew or should have known about the origins of that technology and failed to act, we're personally liable. If Victor lied to us, he violated his duties as CEO. Either way, this is a governance catastrophe. Why are you telling me this? Jennifer leaned forward. Because I need to know if there's more. If the stolen code is the extent of it, or if there are other problems hiding in the company's foundation. Marcus considered her carefully, looked for signs of a trap, found only exhaustion and genuine concern. There's more, he said quietly. The offshore accounts the SEC is investigating. They're connected to contracts Victor negotiated personally. Money that should have been reported as revenue, but was instead channeled through shell companies. He's been skimming for years. Can you prove that? I gave the SEC 40 pages of documentation yesterday. Bank transfers, contract modifications, emails from Victor's personal account directing the accountants to reclassify certain payments. Jennifer's face went pale. How much are we talking about? Rough estimate? Somewhere between 80 and 120 million over 6 years. She sat back, silent. Marcus continued. The layoffs scheduled for January 15th. Victor's planning to announce them as restructuring for efficiency. But the real reason is to hide the missing revenue. Cut costs dramatically right before the annual audit so the numbers balance. 700 people. 712. I have the list. Jennifer closed her eyes. This is going to destroy the company. It's going to destroy Victor. The company can survive if you act fast. Remove him. Cooperate with the SEC. Settle with me before this goes to trial. You might even keep your board seat if you're transparent about what you knew and when you knew it. And if we don't? Marcus shrugged. Then you go down with him. The SEC will assume the entire board was complicit. Shareholders will sue everyone. The company will be lucky to survive the scandal. Jennifer opened her eyes, looked at him with something like respect. You planned this perfectly. I plan to expose theft and fraud. Everything else is just Victor's choices catching up with him. She pulled out her phone, typed something quickly. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for tonight. Victor doesn't get a vote, conflict of interest. I'm going to recommend immediate suspension pending investigation. He'll fight it. He can fight from outside the building. Jennifer stood. Jennifer, Mr. Reed, I can't promise anything. But if even half of what you're telling me is true, Victor Hale's tenure as CEO ends today. And my equity? That's a negotiation for lawyers. But between us? She met his eyes. You built the foundation this company stands on. You deserve recognition, compensation, and probably an apology from every person who believed Victor's version of events. Marcus stood as well. I'll settle for the first two. They shook hands, brief, professional. Jennifer left first. Marcus sat back down, finished his coffee. Across the street, through the cafe window, he could see the Hale Industries building rising against the skyline. Glass and steel and stolen dreams. By tonight, it might not belong to Victor anymore. The SEC interview was in a government building that looked designed to intimidate. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, conference rooms with no windows. Melissa Rourke met him in the lobby. She was younger than Marcus expected. Sharp suit, sharper eyes. Mr. Reed, thank you for coming in. I said I would. People say a lot of things. Fewer follow through. She led him down a corridor, especially when following through means potentially implicating themselves in crimes. Marcus stopped. Am I being charged with something? Should you be? I collected evidence from trash receptacles in a building where I was legally employed. I photographed documents that were discarded and therefore legally abandoned property. I reported what I found to appropriate authorities. If that's a crime, you'll need to arrest a lot of investigative journalists. Melissa smiled slightly. Fair point. No, Mr. Reed, you're not being charged. But I needed to establish that you understand the legal implications of how you gathered this evidence. Because if it turns out you committed crimes to expose crimes, we have a problem. I didn't. Then we're fine. Come on. The conference room contained 3 other people. Federal agents, Marcus assumed, based on the identical suits and expressions of professional skepticism. Melissa made brief introductions. Names. Marcus immediately forgot. Then she opened a laptop and pulled up the first document he'd sent. Let's start with the offshore accounts. For the next 3 hours, Marcus walked them through everything the shell companies Victor had created, the contracts structured to route payments through multiple jurisdictions, the accounting tricks that made stolen revenue look like legitimate business expenses, the pattern of deception that stretched back years. He provided dates, names, account numbers, wire transfer confirmations. The agents asked questions, probed for inconsistencies, tested his knowledge of financial regulations and corporate governance. Marcus answered everything, calmly, precisely, with the confidence of someone who'd spent 3 months memorizing every detail. At hour 2, one of the agents, Johnson, Marcus thought, leaned back in his chair. This is the most comprehensive evidence package I've seen from a civilian. You sure you didn't have help? An inside source? Someone feeding you information? I had access to executive trash bins and a very good memory. And you just happened to find exactly the right documents to prove systematic fraud? Marcus met his eyes. I knew what to look for. I built the company's original systems. I understood the architecture. When I saw inconsistencies in the financial reports executives were throwing away, I recognized them as red flags. The rest was just patience and documentation. Melissa intervened. Mr. Reed isn't on trial here. He brought us evidence. We verify it independently. If it holds up, we proceed with the investigation. And if it doesn't? Johnson asked. Then we drop it and move on. But I've already had our forensic accountants review the preliminary materials. Everything checks out so far. Johnson nodded. Didn't look entirely convinced, but willing to proceed. The questioning continued. By hour 3, Marcus was exhausted, his voice hoarse from talking, his coffee cold, but he could see it in their faces. They believed him. More importantly, they believed the evidence. Melissa finally closed her laptop. Mr. Reed, we'll need you available for follow-up questions, possibly testimony if this proceeds to criminal charges. Are you willing to cooperate fully? Yes. Even if it means public testimony, court appearances, media scrutiny? I've been invisible for 15 years. I can handle being visible for a few months if it means Victor Hale faces consequences. Melissa exchanged glances with her colleagues. Some silent communication Marcus couldn't read. All right, we'll be in touch. Thank you for your time. Marcus stood, shook hands, walked out of the building into late afternoon sunlight that felt surreal after 3 hours of fluorescent interrogation. His phone had 17 messages, 3 from David about discovery deadlines, 5 from reporters, 2 from numbers he didn't recognize, and 1 from Jennifer Park, sent 20 minutes ago. Emergency board meeting concluded. Victor Hale suspended as CEO effective immediately. Press release going out at 5 p.m. Thought you'd want to know. Marcus read it twice. Then he called David. Did you see? I saw, David interrupted. The board moved faster than I expected. Victor's lawyers are going to argue this is retaliation, that the board is trying to scapegoat him to protect themselves. Is it working? Won't matter. The suspension is based on the SEC investigation and your lawsuit. Both are legitimate grounds. Victor can fight it, but he's fighting from outside the building now. David paused. Marcus, this is really happening. You're actually winning. Marcus looked up at the government building behind him. Thought about Victor in that corner office, being escorted out by security. Thought about 15 years of waiting. We haven't won yet. This is just the beginning of the end. Then enjoy it. You earned this. Marcus hung up, checked the time. 4:47 p.m. 13 minutes until the press release. He started walking. Didn't have a destination. Just needed to move. His phone rang again. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. But something made him answer. Marcus Reed. Mr. Reed, this is Rachel Kimura from the New York Times. I'm working on a feature about your case. I was hoping... No comment. I understand you're getting a lot of press attention, but this would be different. A comprehensive profile. Your full story. Not just the lawsuit, but the 15 years before it. The cost of being erased. The decision to come back. We'd want to do this right. Marcus stopped walking. Why? Because this isn't just a legal case. It's a story about power, about who gets credit for innovation, about what happens to people who challenge the tech industry's chosen winners. Rachel's voice was sincere. And I think your story deserves to be told completely. Not in sound bites, not in viral videos, but as a full narrative. When would you want to do this? Whenever you're ready. I know you're dealing with active litigation, but when the time comes, if you're willing, I'd like to tell your story properly. Marcus considered it. The exposure, the risk, the possibility of finally, completely being seen. I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking. Thank you, Mr. Reed. She hung up. Marcus stood on the sidewalk as pedestrians flowed around him, checked the time again, 5:01 p.m. Somewhere, right now, reporters were reading the press release. Stock traders were reacting to the news. Victor Hale was realizing his empire had just been ripped out from under him. And Marcus Reed was standing on a random street corner, feeling the weight of 15 years finally start to lift. His phone buzzed one more time, text from a number he recognized instantly, even though he'd deleted the contact years ago. Victor, this isn't over. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started. I will destroy you for this. I will take everything you have left. You made a mistake coming back. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed back, carefully, precisely. You already took everything. That's why I have nothing left to lose. Sleep well, Victor. He blocked the number, pocketed his phone, and kept walking. Because momentum was everything, and he wasn't done yet. The morning after Victor's suspension, Marcus woke to his phone vibrating across the nightstand like a trapped insect. 6 a.m. 43 notifications. The world had opinions about what happened yesterday, and apparently those opinions couldn't wait for reasonable hours. He ignored them all and made coffee instead. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. For 3 months, he'd lived with the constant background noise of preparation, the planning, the evidence gathering, the careful construction of Victor's downfall. Now that machinery was in motion, running on its own momentum, and Marcus found himself in the strange, empty space between launching an attack and watching it land. His laptop pinged. Email from David Brennan with the subject line, "Discovery Hell Incoming." Marcus opened it over his second cup of coffee. The email was characteristically blunt. Hale's legal team had responded to the lawsuit with a motion to compel that was, in David's words, aggressive to the point of psychotic. They wanted everything, every document Marcus had collected, every photograph, every piece of evidence. They wanted his employment records from the janitorial company, his financial statements for the past 5 years, his personal emails and text messages going back to the original settlement. David's analysis followed. They're fishing. They know the evidence is bad for them, so they're trying to bury us in procedural warfare. Make it so expensive and exhausting that you give up. Standard playbook for corporate defense. The good news is the judge already denied their dismissal motion, which means she thinks you have a case. The bad news is this is going to get ugly. Marcus typed back, "How ugly?" The response came within 30 seconds. Depositions, interrogatories, probably personal attacks on your credibility. They'll try to paint you as unstable, vindictive, possibly criminal for the undercover work. They'll dig into your life looking for anything to discredit you. And that's before trial. If we actually get to trial, multiply everything by 10. Marcus stared at the screen, took another sip of coffee that had gone cold. He'd known this was coming, had prepared for it mentally. But seeing it spelled out in David's practical, unflinching assessment made it real in a way that planning never had. His phone rang. Sarah Chen. "Have you seen the Wall Street Journal?" she asked without preamble. "Not yet. Front page, business section. They're running a feature on the Hale suspension with quotes from anonymous board members. Someone's leaking." Marcus pulled up the article on his laptop. The headline was surgical. Hale Industries in crisis as founder allegations trigger board revolt. The piece was devastating. It quoted 3 unnamed board members expressing serious concerns about Victor's leadership and troubling questions about the company's technical origins. One described the stolen code allegations as potentially catastrophic for shareholder value. Another suggested the board had been inadequately informed about the company's legal exposure. The article also included a statement from Victor's personal lawyer calling the suspension a premature overreaction to unsubstantiated claims from a disgruntled individual, and promising aggressive legal action to defend Mr. Hale's reputation and restore his position. Sarah's voice cut through his reading. "The anonymous sources, that's Jennifer Park, isn't it?" "I can't confirm that." "You don't have to. The quotes match her communication style exactly." Sarah paused. "Marcus, the board is cutting Victor loose. They're building a narrative where he's a rogue CEO who deceived them, which might be true, but it also conveniently absolves them of responsibility." "Does it matter? As long as Victor faces consequences, it matters because they're going to offer you a settlement. Probably soon, before discovery gets too deep, before the SEC investigation forces them to reveal more than they want. They'll give you money, maybe equity, definitely credit for your work. And in exchange, you'll agree to certain narratives about how this all unfolded." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "You think I should take it?" "I think you should consider it carefully. You wanted justice. You wanted Victor exposed. Both of those things are happening. The question is whether you need to burn everything down completely or if partial victory is enough." "Partial victory is how we got here in the first place. I took a settlement 12 years ago and Victor kept building his empire on my work." "That settlement had a non-disclosure agreement. This one won't. This one will include public acknowledgement of your contributions. Your name on the technology patents. Probably a significant equity stake or cash payment. Sarah's voice softened. I'm not saying give up. I'm saying think about what winning actually looks like, because total destruction is expensive. For everyone. Marcus didn't respond immediately. Through his window, he could see the city waking up, people heading to work, living ordinary lives that didn't include legal warfare and stolen empires. I'll think about it, he said finally. Good. And Marcus? Whatever you decide, I'm still covering this story, so don't do anything stupid without calling me first. She hung up. Marcus sat in the growing morning light and thought about victory, about what he actually wanted from this entire catastrophe. He wanted Victor to lose everything the way Marcus had lost everything, wanted the world to know the truth, wanted his name restored to the company he'd helped build. But did he want to spend the next year drowning in discovery disputes and depositions? Did he want his entire life examined under hostile cross-examination? Did he want to become the face of tech industry whistleblowing when all he really wanted was recognition for work he'd done 15 years ago? The answer should have been simple. It wasn't. His phone buzzed again. Text from a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Reed, this is Thomas Caldwell, interim CEO of Hale Industries. The board would like to meet with you privately to discuss a resolution. Are you available this week? Marcus stared at the message. The board was moving faster than even Sarah predicted. He forwarded the text to David with a question mark. David called immediately. Don't respond yet. Let me set ground rules. They want to settle before the SEC investigation gains more traction, before your lawsuit gets to discovery, before more details leak to the press, which means we have leverage. What kind of leverage? The kind where we ask for the moon and see if they're desperate enough to deliver it. David's voice carried barely suppressed excitement. Marcus, they're scared. The stock dropped another 12% this morning. 3 institutional investors are demanding emergency updates. The SEC scheduled preliminary interviews with 4 senior executives. The board knows this gets worse the longer it drags out. So we negotiate. So we negotiate from a position of strength, but we need to be smart about this. What do you actually want? Money? Equity? Your old position back? Public vindication? All of the above? Marcus walked to his window, looked out at the skyline where Hale Industries headquarters rose like a monument to someone else's success. I want my name on the technology, co-founder credit in all company materials, and I want Victor gone permanently, not suspended, terminated, with cause. That last one might be harder. The board can suspend him, but terminating a CEO with cause requires proving serious misconduct. That's a high bar. I gave the SEC documentation of fraud. That's serious misconduct. Alleged fraud. Until the SEC makes formal findings, it's just allegations. The board might not want to wait for that process. David paused. But we can try. Worst case, we negotiate for a resignation with no possibility of return. Victor leaves. You get credit and compensation. Everyone moves on. I don't want him to resign gracefully. I want him fired for theft. David's sigh was audible. Then we're probably going to trial, which means months of litigation, massive legal bills, public testimony, your entire life under examination. Are you prepared for that? Marcus thought about Victor's smile at the gala, about 15 years of erasure, about every moment he'd been invisible while Victor collected accolades for work Marcus had created. Yes, he said, I'm prepared. All right, then I'll respond to Caldwell. We'll take the meeting, but I'm setting the terms. And Marcus, don't talk to anyone from Hale Industries without me present. Not the board, not their lawyers, definitely not Victor. Understood. Marcus hung up and immediately received another call. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Mr. Reed? The voice was young, male, nervous. My name is Jason Chen. I'm a software engineer at Hale Industries. I've been working with your original encryption code for 3 years. Marcus's hand tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? I asked around. Look, I know you probably don't want to talk to random Hale employees, but I needed to tell you something. The code you wrote, it's brilliant, revolutionary. We've been building on it for years, and it's still the foundation of everything we do. Jason paused, and none of us knew. We all thought it was Victor's creation. The senior engineers maybe knew it came from the early days, but your name was never mentioned. Never in documentation. Never in training. Never anywhere. Why are you telling me this? Because it's wrong. I've seen the news coverage, the code comparisons, and I checked our internal repository last night. Found commit logs from 14 years ago with your signature. Thousands of lines of code attributed to M. Reed. But in all the official company materials, in everything we're taught, that work is credited to Hale Industries' founding team, or just to Victor directly. Jason's voice gained strength. And I wanted you to know that some of us, a lot of us actually, were pissed. We didn't sign up to work for a company built on stolen credit. So if you need testimony or documentation or anything from engineers who've actually worked with your code, there are people willing to speak up. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not quite hope. Not quite vindication. Something newer and more fragile. That could cost you your job. Maybe. But I didn't become an engineer to help rich guys steal other people's work. I became an engineer because I wanted to build things that matter. And your code, it matters. It's elegant and powerful, and it deserves proper attribution. Jason, I appreciate this, really. But you need to understand what you're risking. Victor has lawyers who will destroy anyone who helps me. The board might clean house to protect themselves. You could end up blacklisted in the industry. I know. I've thought about it, and I'm still calling. Jason laughed nervously. Look, I'm not brave. I'm terrified. But some things are worth being terrified for. So if you need me, you've got my number now. He hung up before Marcus could respond. Marcus stood there holding the phone, feeling the weight of unexpected solidarity. He'd spent 3 months invisible in that building, assuming every employee was complicit in Victor's mythology. But Jason Chen proved that wrong, proved there were people inside Hale Industries who cared about truth more than convenience. The question was how many more like him existed. His laptop pinged again. Another email. This one from an address he didn't recognize. Anonymous.source. 47protonmail.com. The subject line read, "You'll want to see this." Marcus opened it cautiously, half expecting malware or a legal trap. Instead, he found a compressed file containing 12 documents. Internal Hale Industries emails. All from Victor's personal account. All discussing the Reed problem with corporate lawyers dating back 8 years. One email from Victor to the general counsel was particularly damning. The Reed encryption protocols are still the backbone of our platform. Legal thinks we're exposed if he ever challenges the original settlement. We need to ensure all documentation refers to these as legacy Hale systems, not Reed protocols. But update all internal materials accordingly. Another from 6 years ago. SEC asking questions about early funding rounds. Make sure nothing in our filings mentions Reed as co-founder. As far as official record shows, company was founded by me alone with early contractor support. A third, from 3 years ago. If Reed ever resurfaces with claims, our position is that he was a junior developer on contract, not a true founder. All early agreements can be interpreted that way if necessary. Bill agrees we can defend this. Marcus read through all 12 emails twice. Then he forwarded them to David and the SEC with a simple note. Anonymous source. Verify authenticity. If real, this is premeditated fraud. David called back within 5 minutes. Where did you get these? Anonymous email, just now. Marcus. If these are authentic, Victor's not just facing a lawsuit. He's facing criminal charges. This is documentary evidence of knowingly fraudulent statements to federal regulators. David's voice was sharp with excitement and concern. But we need to verify the source. If someone inside Hale Industries leaked these, they could claim the documents are fabricated, or that you orchestrated the leak yourself. I didn't. I have no idea who sent them. I believe you. But Victor's lawyers won't. They'll argue you're manufacturing evidence. David paused. Forward me the original email with full headers. I'll have a digital forensics expert trace the source. In the meantime, don't mention these to anyone. Not reporters, not the board. Nobody. Marcus agreed and hung up. Then he sat very still and thought about who inside Hale Industries hated Victor enough to commit career suicide by leaking executive emails. Jennifer Park was the obvious candidate. She had board access, motive, and the sophistication to know what documents would matter. But she'd been careful in their meeting. Professional, calculated. Leaking like this felt too risky for someone playing the long political game. Jason Chen was too junior to have access to Victor's personal email. That left someone else, someone senior enough to access executive communications, someone who'd watched Victor operate for years and finally decided enough was enough. Marcus's phone buzzed. Text from the anonymous email source. More where that came from. Victor has enemies inside his own company. You're not alone in this fight. Marcus stared at the message, typed back carefully. Who are you? The response came after a long pause. Someone who watched him destroy too many people. Someone who's tired of being complicit. That's all you need to know. Then, check your email again in 3 hours. I'm sending you the offshore account documentation the SEC hasn't found yet. The conversation ended. Marcus set down his phone and allowed himself a moment of pure, undiluted satisfaction. Victor Hale had spent 15 years building walls around his empire, had protected himself with lawyers and money, and carefully constructed narratives. But empires built on lies always had cracks, and sometimes those cracks came from the inside. 3 hours later, exactly on schedule, another encrypted email arrived. This one contained bank statements, wire transfer receipts, and contract documents showing the full scope of Victor's offshore operation. $87 million routed through shell companies in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and Luxembourg over 6 years. Revenue that should have been reported to shareholders and taxed by the United States government. Money that had instead been funneled into Victor's personal accounts under the guise of international consulting fees. Marcus forwarded everything to Melissa Rourke at the SEC with a note. Source remains anonymous. Verify authenticity. This appears to document systematic tax fraud and securities violations. Melissa called within 30 minutes. Mr. Reed, where are these documents coming from? I honestly don't know. Someone inside Hale Industries is feeding me information. That someone is committing multiple felonies, unauthorized access to company files, theft of proprietary information, possible violation of attorney-client privilege if these came from legal communications. I didn't ask for them. They're being sent to me unsolicited. Melissa's laugh was dry. Convenient and completely unprovable either way. She paused. But if these documents are authentic, and our preliminary review suggests they are, then Victor Hale is looking at criminal prosecution, not just civil penalties, actual prison time. Marcus let that sink in. Prison. For Victor Hale, the man who'd stolen Marcus's company and spent 15 years living like royalty on someone else's genius. How long? He asked quietly. If we can prove knowing, systematic fraud? 5 to 10 years? Maybe more if we add on tax evasion and money laundering. Melissa's voice hardened. But Mr. Reed, I need you to understand something. If your anonymous source gets exposed, everything they've provided could be thrown out as illegally obtained, which means we need to verify all of this through our own investigation, independent of the leaks. Can you do that? We can try. The offshore accounts are traceable if we know where to look. Your source just gave us the map. Now we have to walk the path ourselves. She paused. And Mr. Reed, tell your source to stop. We appreciate the help, but we can't build a case on stolen documents. We need clean evidence. Marcus agreed and hung up. Then he sent an email to the anonymous source. SEC says stop. They appreciate the information but need to find evidence independently. Anything more you send could jeopardize the investigation. The response came within minutes. Understood. I've sent enough. The rest is up to them. Good luck, Marcus. Finish what you started. That was the last message Marcus received from the anonymous source. But the damage was already done. The evidence was out there. The SEC had their roadmap. Victor's walls were crumbling from the inside. The meeting with Thomas Caldwell and the board was scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. Neutral territory, a law office in Midtown Manhattan. David insisted on bringing a second attorney, a woman named Patricia Reeves, who specialized in corporate settlements. Marcus wore his only suit, the one he'd bought for the original settlement hearing 12 years ago. It still fit, barely, though the shoulders felt tighter than he remembered. David picked him up at 1:30. Remember, we listen more than we talk. They're going to make an offer. We're going to say we'll consider it. Then we counteroffer. This is a negotiation, not a conversation. What if their offer is insulting? Then we walk, but I doubt it will be. They're too desperate. The law office was exactly what Marcus expected. Marble floors, mahogany furniture, conference rooms designed to intimidate. Thomas Caldwell was waiting with 3 board members, Jennifer Park, a man Marcus didn't recognize, and a woman who introduced herself as Helen Cartwright. All of them had the careful, neutral expressions of people preparing for an unpleasant but necessary conversation. Caldwell was mid-60s, silver hair, the kind of steady presence boards appointed when they needed someone to clean up a mess. He shook Marcus's hand with appropriate firmness. "Mr. Reed, thank you for coming. I know this situation is difficult for everyone." Marcus nodded, sat down across from them. David and Patricia flanked him like professional bodyguards. Caldwell didn't waste time. "We've reviewed the allegations in your lawsuit. We've examined the technical documentation. We've consulted with independent experts about the code comparisons. And we've discussed this at length as a board." He paused. "We believe you have legitimate claims regarding intellectual property and founding credit." Jennifer Park added, "We also believe the company has an obligation to correct the historical record. Your contributions to Hale Industries were foundational. That should be acknowledged." Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Acknowledged how?" Helen Cartwright slid a document across the table. "We're prepared to offer the following settlement. First, formal recognition of your co-founder status in all company materials, including the official corporate history and website. Second, attribution of the core encryption technology to you personally, with your name on all related patents. Third, a cash payment of $45 million as compensation for unpaid equity and licensing fees." Marcus didn't touch the document. "What about Victor?" Caldwell's expression tightened. "Mr. Hale has been suspended pending the outcome of the SEC investigation. Depending on their findings, the board will make a determination about his long-term status with the company." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer we can provide at this time. We can't terminate an executive for alleged misconduct before investigations are complete. It would expose the company to wrongful termination suits." David leaned forward. "The settlement offer, does it require Mr. Reed to drop his lawsuit?" "Yes. Complete resolution of all claims past and present." "And a non-disclosure agreement?" Helen shook her head. "No NDA. Mr. Reed would be free to discuss his role in the company's founding and his technical contributions. The only restriction would be on disclosing the settlement amount and the terms of our negotiation." Patricia made notes. "What about ongoing cooperation with the SEC investigation?" "That's between Mr. Reed and the SEC. The settlement doesn't affect his ability to testify or provide evidence." Caldwell met Marcus's eyes. "We're not trying to silence you, Mr. Reed. We're trying to correct an injustice and move forward." Marcus looked at the document. $45 million, co-founder recognition, his name on the patents, everything he'd fought for except Victor's complete destruction. "I need time to consider this," he said. "Of course. We're prepared to give you 1 week." Caldwell stood. "Mr. Reed, I want you to understand something. I wasn't on this board when you were forced out. I didn't participate in any of the decisions that led to this situation, but I've spent the last week learning about what happened to you, and I'm appalled. What Victor did was wrong. The board's failure to investigate was wrong. You deserved better." Marcus stood as well. "Then fire him, permanently. Make a public statement that he engaged in intellectual property theft and fraud. Don't let him resign quietly. Don't let him keep his reputation. If the SEC investigation confirms criminal conduct, we will, but we need due process. We need evidence that will stand up in court. Right now, we have serious allegations and substantial questions. That's enough for suspension. It's not enough for termination with cause." Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to demand immediate action. But he could see the calculation in their faces. They were protecting the company first. Justice for Marcus was secondary to protecting shareholder value. "I'll have an answer by next Friday," Marcus said. They shook hands again. Professional, cordial, both sides maintaining the fiction that this was a friendly negotiation rather than a carefully orchestrated retreat. Outside the building, David turned to him immediately. $45 million, full recognition, no NDA except on settlement terms. Marcus, this is a phenomenal offer. It lets Victor off easy. It gets you everything you asked for except personal revenge on Hale. That's not revenge, that's accountability. Patricia interrupted quietly. Mr. Reed, I understand your feelings, but from a legal standpoint, this settlement accomplishes your core objectives. You get credit, you get compensation, you get your story told. The only thing you don't get is the satisfaction of watching Victor Hale perp walked out of the building. And if the SEC doesn't find enough evidence, if he escapes criminal charges, then at least you'll have been made whole. At least the truth will be public. Patricia's expression was sympathetic but firm. You can't control what the SEC does. You can't control how the criminal justice system handles white-collar crime, but you can control whether you accept recognition and compensation for work you did 15 years ago. Marcus walked to the curb, watched traffic flow past, thought about what victory actually meant. He'd wanted to destroy Victor Hale completely, wanted him humiliated, broke, imprisoned. But what he'd actually accomplished was exposing the truth, forcing acknowledgement, creating consequences. Maybe that was enough. Maybe revenge wasn't the same as justice, and justice didn't require total annihilation. Or maybe he was just tired. I need to think, he said finally. David nodded. 1 week. Then we respond. They drove back in silence, Marcus watching the city slide past the window, wondering if he was about to make the right choice or repeat the same mistake he'd made 12 years ago. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every possible outcome like a programmer debugging faulty code. Accept the settlement and walk away vindicated but unsatisfied. Reject it and spend the next year drowning in legal warfare with no guarantee of a better result. Both options felt simultaneously right and catastrophically wrong. At 3 a.m., he gave up on sleep and made coffee, opened his laptop, started reading through the settlement documents David had sent over. The language was dense, carefully constructed to protect the company while appearing generous. $45 million paid out over 3 years with tax implications that would reduce the actual amount to maybe $32 million after everything was settled. Co-founder recognition in all future-forward company materials, which technically didn't require them to change anything already published. Patent attribution that acknowledged his significant contributions but stopped short of calling it theft. It was a masterpiece of corporate diplomacy, enough to look like justice without admitting actual wrongdoing. Marcus was midway through the third reading when his phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number at 3:47 a.m. The message was simple. Coffee? I think we need to talk. Rita. Rita, his former supervisor from the janitorial company, the woman who'd hired him as Mike and never questioned why an overqualified candidate wanted night shift floor maintenance. Marcus stared at the message, wondered how she'd gotten his real number, wondered why she was awake at this hour, wondered what she possibly had to say that couldn't wait for morning. He typed back, "Where?" The response came immediately. "Same place you had your first shift orientation, 6 a.m. That gave him 2 hours to shower, dress, and figure out what Rita could want badly enough to text him at 3 in the morning. He arrived at the diner at 5:52 a.m. The place was nearly empty except for a handful of third-shift workers and one elderly man reading a newspaper. Rita sat in a back booth, 2 cups of coffee already on the table. She looked older than Marcus remembered, more tired, but her eyes were sharp as he slid into the seat across from her. "Mr. Reed," she said quietly. "Or should I still call you Mike?" "Marcus is fine." Rita pushed one of the coffee cups toward him. "I've been watching the news, reading the articles, seeing your face all over social media. And I kept thinking about the quiet guy who took a janitorial job 3 months ago and never complained once about scrubbing executive toilets." Marcus sipped the coffee, waited. "You played me," Rita continued. "Used my company as cover to infiltrate Hale Industries. Got me to give you access to floors you had no business being on. Made me complicit in corporate espionage. I cleaned floors. I collected evidence from trash, nothing illegal." "Nothing illegal," Rita repeated. "Right. Just ethically questionable. And now my company's getting calls from Hale Industries lawyers asking about our hiring practices and background check procedures. Asking whether we knew you were using a fake name, whether we were paid to place you there. Marcus set down his cup. I'm sorry. I didn't think it would blow back on you. Of course you didn't think about it. People like you never think about the collateral damage. Rita's voice was sharp, but not quite angry. Frustrated, maybe. Resigned. I've worked in janitorial services for 18 years. It's honest work, hard work, and it doesn't pay much, but it's legitimate. Now I've got corporate lawyers implying I run some kind of industrial espionage operation. Tell them the truth. You hired someone with good references. You had no reason to suspect anything unusual. You're a victim of my deception. That's what my lawyer said to tell them. Rita leaned back. But here's the thing, Marcus. I'm not a victim. Because I knew. Marcus went very still. Rita smiled slightly. Not at first. First couple weeks, I thought you were just another overqualified guy who couldn't find better work. Seen that before. Economy crashes. People take what they can get. But then I started noticing things. The way you looked at the building, the way you moved through those upper floors like you'd been there before. The questions you asked about executive schedules and security protocols. Why didn't you say anything? Because I've worked in enough corporate buildings to know what they're like. I've seen executives treat cleaning staff like furniture, seen them throw trash on floors we just mopped, seen them scream at my people for being visible during business hours. Rita's expression hardened. And I've cleaned Victor Hale's office, seen the way he talks to people he thinks are beneath him. So when I figured out you weren't who you claimed to be, I made a choice. I decided I didn't care. Marcus didn't know what to say. Rita continued. I'm not here for an apology. I'm here because I want to know what happens next. The settlement offer. Are you taking it? I don't know. What's the holdup? Marcus gestured vaguely. It's not enough. It gets me money and credit, but it lets Victor walk away. He stays on suspension until the SEC investigation concludes, and if they can't prove criminal conduct, he probably gets his job back. Maybe with some restrictions, maybe with a slap on the wrist, but he survives. And you want him destroyed. I want him to face real consequences, the kind that matter. Rita was quiet for a moment. Then she said something Marcus wasn't expecting. I knew someone like you once, 20 years ago. Woman named Carol who worked in my building. Smart, capable, underpaid. Her boss took credit for her ideas, got promoted off her work, then fired her when she complained. She sued, spent 3 years fighting, won eventually, got a settlement, got her name cleared. But those 3 years ate her alive. The stress destroyed her marriage. Her health suffered. By the time she won, the victory felt hollow because she'd sacrificed everything else to get it. So you're saying I should take the settlement. I'm saying you should think carefully about what you're actually fighting for. Is it justice or is it revenge? Because justice might look like $45 million and public recognition. Revenge looks like spending years trying to put Victor Hale in prison while your own life crumbles around you. Marcus stared into his coffee. He stole 15 years from me. He erased me from history. He made me invisible. And then he had the arrogance to humiliate me in front of 200 people while thinking I was just some janitor he could crush without consequences. And now the whole world knows what he did. Now his board suspended him. Now the SEC is investigating him. Now his empire is cracking. That's not nothing, Marcus. It's not enough. Rita stood up, put cash on the table for the coffee. Then I hope you know what you're getting into. Because men like Victor Hale don't go down easy. They have money and lawyers and connections, and they're willing to burn everything to protect themselves. You might win, but you might also lose everything in the process. She paused at the edge of the booth. For what it's worth, I'm glad you exposed him. The world needed to see who he really is. I just hope the cost doesn't destroy you. Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone with cold coffee and harder questions. He sat there until the breakfast rush started. Until the diner filled with people heading to jobs that didn't involve legal warfare and corporate espionage. Until the elderly man with the newspaper left and was replaced by a young couple arguing about rent. Then Marcus paid his bill and walked out into the early morning light, still no closer to a decision. His phone rang. David Brennan. We have a problem. Marcus's stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Victor just filed a countersuit. He's claiming defamation, intentional interference with business relationships, and fraudulent misrepresentation. He's asking for 200 million in damages. 200? That's insane. On what grounds? On the grounds that you deliberately infiltrated his company under false pretenses, stole proprietary information, leaked confidential materials to damage the company's reputation, and made false allegations of fraud and theft without sufficient evidence. David's voice was grim. It's a garbage suit. It won't survive summary judgment, but it's going to cost us time and money to fight, which is exactly the point. He's trying to bury me in legal costs. He's trying to make this so expensive and exhausting that you accept whatever settlement the board offers just to make it stop. Classic intimidation tactic. Marcus felt the anger rising, cold, controlled, the kind that made good decisions impossible. File our response. I'm not backing down. Marcus, think about this. I've thought about nothing else for 3 days. File the response. We fight both cases. David sighed. This is going to get worse before it gets better. I know. After hanging up, Marcus received a call from Melissa Rourke. Mr. Reed, I wanted to give you a heads up. We've completed our preliminary investigation into the offshore accounts. We found enough evidence to move forward with formal charges against Victor Hale for securities fraud and tax evasion. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. You're pressing charges. We're presenting the case to a grand jury next week. If they indict, which I think they will, Victor Hale will face criminal prosecution. Could be looking at significant prison time if convicted. How significant? 10 to 15 years, potentially. Depends on how much we can prove and whether he cooperates. Melissa paused. Mr. Reed, this is a big win, for you and for us. We wouldn't have found this without your initial evidence. What about the board settlement offer? Does this affect that? That's between you and them. But I will say this. If Victor gets indicted, the board's calculation changes. They won't want him anywhere near the company. They'll probably force him out completely just to distance themselves from the scandal. Marcus thanked her and hung up. Then he sat down on a park bench and tried to process what just happened. Criminal charges. Real prison time. Victor Hale facing actual consequences for his actions. This was what Marcus wanted. What he'd fought for. What 3 months of scrubbing floors and collecting evidence had been building toward. So why did it feel incomplete? His phone buzzed. Email from Sarah Chen with the subject line, "You need to see this." The email contained a link to a video. Marcus opened it. Victor Hale stood behind a podium, looking every inch the wronged executive. Behind him, a banner read, "Statement to Shareholders." The video was from earlier that morning. Victor's voice was steady, controlled, perfectly calibrated for maximum sympathy. I want to address the recent allegations made against me and Hale Industries. First, let me be absolutely clear. These allegations are false. They are the product of a vindictive former contractor who was let go over a decade ago for performance issues and has been harboring resentment ever since. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Victor continued. Marcus Reed was never a co-founder of Hale Industries. He was a talented programmer who did contract work for us in the early days. Yes, some of his code made it into our initial products, but that work was done under contract, properly compensated, and legally transferred to company ownership. To claim otherwise is simply false. The camera cut to a slide showing what appeared to be contracts and payment records. As you can see, Mr. Reed was paid fairly for his work. When he later claimed he deserved equity, we negotiated a settlement in good faith. He signed that agreement, he accepted payment, and now, 12 years later, he's decided that wasn't enough. Another slide. This one showing Marcus's janitorial employment records. Mr. Reed recently infiltrated our company under a false identity. He gained access to confidential areas. He stole proprietary information. He leaked sensitive materials to damage our reputation and stock price. And now he's working with federal investigators while simultaneously demanding millions in what amounts to extortion. Victor looked directly at the camera. His expression was perfect. Wounded. Sincere. Absolutely convincing if you didn't know the truth. I have dedicated my life to building Hale Industries into a company that employs over 3,000 people and serves millions of customers. I will not allow one man's vendetta to destroy what we've built together. I am fully cooperating with all investigations. I am confident the truth will exonerate me. And I will fight these false allegations with every resource at my disposal. The video ended. Marcus watched it again, then a third time. Victor was good. Had always been good at this. The presentation, the spin, the narrative control. And now he was using those skills to paint Marcus as a bitter ex-employee running an extortion scheme. Marcus's phone rang immediately. David. Tell me you saw the press conference. I saw it. That was a declaration of war. He's not backing down. He's going scorched earth. Let him. The SEC has evidence. We have documentation. He can spin all he wants. Marcus, public perception matters. Right now, social media is split. Half the people think you're a hero exposing corporate fraud. The other half think you're a vengeful ex-employee who committed crimes to manufacture a case. Victor just fed that second narrative with what looks like credible evidence. Marcus thought about Rita's warning, about Carol, who won her lawsuit but lost everything else, about the cost of fighting men who had unlimited resources and no conscience. Then he thought about Victor's smile at the gala, about 15 years of erasure, about every moment his name should have been mentioned and wasn't. I'm not backing down, he said quietly. Then we prepare for a long fight. Multiple lawsuits, criminal proceedings, media warfare. And we should probably start fundraising because this is going to cost more than anyone anticipated. How much are we talking about? Conservative estimate? 2 to 3 million in legal fees over the next year. Maybe more if both cases go to trial. Marcus did the math. He had some savings, could maybe borrow against his potential settlement, but 3 million was beyond his reach without selling everything he owned. What if we went public, asked for donations? There are people who want to see Victor fall. Crowdfunding your legal defense makes you look desperate, makes it easier for Victor to paint you as the aggressor who needs public support to sustain a frivolous lawsuit. David paused. But there might be another option. Investors. People with money who want to see this case through for their own reasons. I know a few who've been following the story. You mean people who want to bet on the outcome? I mean, people who believe in what you're doing and see an opportunity. If you win, they get a percentage of the settlement. If you lose, they absorb the cost. It's called litigation financing. Marcus felt his stomach turn. The idea of turning his fight for justice into an investment opportunity felt wrong on every level, but so did backing down. Set up the meetings, he said finally. Over the next 3 days, Marcus met with 4 different litigation financing firms. Each one treated his case like a business proposition. They analyzed the evidence, calculated probability of success, estimated potential returns. By the third meeting, Marcus felt less like a person seeking justice and more like a commodity being evaluated for profit potential. The fourth firm, Apex Litigation Partners, made the most aggressive offer. Full funding for all legal costs. No repayment required if he lost. 20% of any settlement or judgment if he won. The catch was control. They wanted approval authority over major legal decisions, wanted to be consulted on settlement negotiations, wanted to ensure their investment was protected. Marcus sat across from their managing partner, a woman named Victoria Cross, who'd made her fortune betting on class action lawsuits, and felt the weight of the decision. Mr. Reed, Victoria said, her voice professionally sympathetic, I understand your hesitation, but let me be direct. Without our funding, you can't afford to fight this case properly. Victor Hale has unlimited resources. You don't. This is how we level the playing field. And if I take your money, I lose control of my own case. You gain partners who want you to win as much as you do. We've reviewed the evidence. We think you have an 80% chance of prevailing on the intellectual property claims, maybe 60% on the fraud allegations. Those are good odds, but only if you can afford to see it through. Marcus looked at the contract in front of him. 23 pages of legal language that essentially signed away 20% of everything he'd fought for in exchange for the ability to keep fighting. I need 24 hours, he said. Victoria nodded. We'll need an answer by Friday. That's when the funding window closes. Marcus left the meeting and walked for 2 hours. Through neighborhoods he didn't recognize, past businesses and homes and ordinary lives that had nothing to do with litigation or revenge or stolen empires. He ended up at a small park, sat on a bench, watched children play while their parents talked about normal things like homework and dinner plans. His phone buzzed. Text from Jason Chen. The engineer who'd called offering to testify. 17 more engineers want to help. We're organizing. If you need us, we're ready. Another text. From a number he didn't recognize, saw your story. I was erased by my co-founder too. Never got justice. Please don't give up. Then another. Former Hale employee here. Victor did the same thing to 3 other people I know. None of them could afford to fight back. You're fighting for all of us. Marcus read through the messages, felt the weight of other people's hopes settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just about him anymore. Wasn't just about 15 years of personal grievance. It was about every person who'd been erased by powerful men, every innovator who'd had their work stolen, every employee who'd been crushed and silenced and made invisible. The question was whether Marcus had the strength to carry that weight. He called David. I'm taking the Apex funding. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. All right, I'll draw up the agreement. We sign on Friday, we file our response to Victor's countersuit on Monday, and then we prepare for war. Marcus hung up, sat on the bench a little longer, thought about Rita's friend Carol, who won but lost everything. Thought about Victor's press conference and the long fight ahead. Thought about the moment when this would finally end and whether he'd recognize himself when it did. Then his phone rang one more time. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Marcus Reed. Mr. Reed. The voice was unfamiliar. Male. Careful. My name is Robert Chen. I'm Jason's father. I'm also a former Hale Industries executive who left the company 6 years ago after disagreeing with Victor Hale's business practices. Marcus sat up straighter. What can I do for you, Mr. Chen? It's what I can do for you. I have documents, internal communications from my time at the company, evidence of how Victor systematically erased contributors and claimed their work as his own. It's not just you, Mr. Reed. You're the one who fought back, but you're not the only victim. Why are you coming forward now? Because my son called me crying yesterday. Said he'd been working with stolen code for 3 years and didn't know it. Said he felt complicit in something wrong. And I realized I'd been complicit too. By staying silent. By walking away instead of speaking up. Robert Chen's voice hardened. I can't give you back 15 years, but I can give you ammunition if you're willing to keep fighting. Marcus closed his eyes, felt the decision crystallize. Send me everything you have, he said. I will. And Mr. Reed, thank you for having the courage to do what the rest of us couldn't. The call ended. Marcus sat in the park as the sun began to set, as the children were called home for dinner, as the ordinary world went on doing ordinary things. And he made his choice, not the safe one, not the easy one, not the one that let him walk away with money and credit and a quiet life, the choice that demanded everything, that risked complete destruction for the possibility of complete victory. He texted David, "Tell the board the settlement offer is rejected. We're going to trial." David's response came back immediately. Are you absolutely certain? Marcus looked at his phone, thought about Victor's smile, about the anonymous source inside Hale Industries, about 17 engineers ready to testify, about Robert Chen and everyone else who'd been silenced. He typed, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Then he stood up, walked out of the park, headed home to prepare for the war he'd just declared. Because momentum was everything, and he'd learned from the best that you don't stop until it's finished. The board's response to Marcus's rejection came within 2 hours. A terse email from Thomas Caldwell expressing disappointment and noting that all future negotiations would occur through legal channels. The corporate politeness had evaporated, replaced by the cold formality of parties preparing for battle. David called immediately after. They're not going to make another offer. You understand that, right? This was your best chance at a clean resolution. I understand, Marcus said. He was standing at his window watching the city lights flicker on as evening settled over Manhattan. How long until trial? Realistically, 8 to 12 months. Discovery will take at least 6. Then motion practice, jury selection, trial prep. We're looking at next fall at the earliest. And Victor's countersuit? That'll move in parallel. Different judge, different timeline, but essentially the same discovery process, which means everything in your life becomes fair game. Bank records, emails, text messages, employment history. They're going to look for anything they can use to discredit you. Marcus had expected this, had prepared for it mentally, but hearing it stated so plainly still sent a chill through him. What about the SEC case? That moves independently. Melissa Rourke told me the grand jury convenes in 2 weeks. If they indict, which she thinks they will, Victor faces criminal trial sometime next year, probably after our civil case concludes. David paused. Marcus, there's still time to reconsider. The board might be willing to negotiate if you reach out in the next 24 hours. I'm not reaching out. Then we move forward. I'll file our formal rejection of the settlement and our response to Victor's countersuit by end of week. After that, there's no going back. Marcus agreed and hung up. He stood at the window for another hour, watching the city and thinking about the months ahead. The depositions, the cross-examinations, the media scrutiny, the financial stress, the constant grinding pressure of litigation that consumed everything it touched. Rita's warning echoed in his mind. The woman who'd won her case but lost everything else in the process. But Marcus couldn't shake the image of Victor at that press conference. The calculated sincerity, the smooth lies, the absolute confidence that money and power would win the day. Some fights weren't about winning cleanly. They were about making sure the other side knew they'd been in a fight. His phone buzzed. Email from Robert Chen with 17 attachments. The subject line read, "The pattern you need to see." Marcus opened the first document. It was an internal memo from 8 years ago, written by Robert to Victor, expressing concern about how credit was being distributed for a major product launch. The memo specifically mentioned 3 engineers whose contributions had been minimized or erased in company communications. Victor's response was attached. Robert, we've discussed this. Public credit goes to leadership. Individual contributors are compensated through salary and bonuses. This is how every successful company operates. I need you to support the team narrative, not undermine it with these internal debates. The next document was similar. A different product, different engineers. Same pattern of erasure. Marcus read through all 17 documents. By the end, he had a comprehensive picture of Victor's methodology. It wasn't just about stealing Marcus's work. It was a systematic approach to leadership that involved claiming credit for everything, minimizing contributors, and building a personal mythology at the expense of everyone around him. This wasn't personal, it was pathological. Marcus forwarded everything to David with a note. This is the pattern. This proves it wasn't just me. Victor has been doing this for years to multiple people. We need to find the others. David's response came back within minutes. This is gold. If we can get even 2 or 3 other victims to testify, we establish a pattern of conduct that transforms your case from a one-time dispute into evidence of systematic fraud. I'm reaching out to Robert tomorrow to discuss witness coordination. Marcus felt something shift. Not hope exactly. Something harder, more certain. The next morning, Sarah Chen called. The grand jury indicted Victor this morning. Securities fraud, tax evasion, and wire fraud. The arraignment is scheduled for Monday. Marcus sat down slowly. It's really happening. It's really happening. Melissa Rourke is holding a press conference at noon. I thought you'd want to watch. Marcus pulled up the live stream at exactly 12 p.m. Melissa stood behind a podium with the SEC seal, flanked by federal prosecutors and agents. Her expression was professional, neutral. But there was steel in her voice. This morning, a federal grand jury returned an indictment against Victor Hale, CEO of Hale Industries, on multiple counts of securities fraud, tax evasion, and wire fraud. The charges stem from a multi-year scheme to conceal revenue through offshore shell companies and provide false information to shareholders and federal regulators. She continued, laying out the evidence methodically. The offshore accounts, the hidden contracts, the falsified reports, the systematic deception that had generated over $80 million in unreported income. This investigation was initiated based on evidence provided by a whistleblower. That evidence led us to conduct an independent investigation which corroborated the allegations and uncovered additional criminal conduct. We are committed to holding corporate executives accountable when they violate the public trust. The questions from reporters came fast. Melissa handled them with practiced ease, refusing to comment on the civil lawsuit, but making it clear the criminal case was strong. Marcus watched until the end. Then he sat in silence, processing what had just happened. Victor Hale was now a federally indicted criminal, facing prison time, facing the complete destruction of his reputation and empire. This was what Marcus had fought for, what 3 months of invisible humiliation had built toward. So why didn't it feel like enough? His phone rang. It was David. The indictment changes everything. The board is going to have to terminate Victor now. They can't keep him on even suspended status with federal criminal charges pending. And our civil case just got exponentially stronger. How so? Because now we can reference the criminal charges in our lawsuit. We can argue that the same pattern of fraud and deception Victor used with the SEC, he used with you. It's corroborating evidence of character and methodology. David's excitement was palpable. Marcus, we might actually win this. Not just settle, actually win in court. When does the criminal trial start? Probably 6 months, maybe longer. Federal cases move slowly. But here's the thing. If Victor gets convicted first, our civil case becomes almost automatic. A criminal conviction for fraud related to the same conduct we're suing over? That's devastating to his defense. Marcus absorbed this. So we wait for the criminal trial to conclude? We continue our case on the current timeline, but if the criminal trial happens first and he's convicted, we can use that verdict. It's called collateral estoppel. Basically, facts established in the criminal trial can't be relitigated in our civil case. And if he's acquitted? David paused. Then we have a harder fight. But the burden of proof is different. Criminal cases require proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Civil cases just need a preponderance of evidence. We can lose the criminal case and still win ours. They talked strategy for another 20 minutes. Then David had to go, leaving Marcus alone with the news that Victor Hale's world was collapsing in real time. That afternoon, Hale Industries issued a statement. Victor was terminated as CEO effective immediately. Thomas Caldwell was named permanent CEO. The board expressed full confidence in the company's future and committed to complete transparency and cooperation with all investigations. The stock dropped another 18%. Marcus read the statement 3 times, felt the satisfaction of watching Victor lose everything he'd built on stolen work. Then his phone buzzed. Text from Jason Chen. 23 engineers now. We're all willing to testify about the code attribution issues. And my dad found 4 more former executives who left because of Victor's behavior. This is getting big. Marcus stared at the message. 23 engineers, 4 executives. Robert Chen's documentary evidence. The SEC indictment. The board's termination. The case he'd started as a solo crusade was becoming a movement. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. Mr. Reed, this is Amanda Foster. I was Victor Hale's executive assistant for 6 years. I left the company in 2019 because I couldn't stomach what he was doing anymore. Marcus grabbed a pen. What was he doing? Everything you've accused him of, and more. I watched him take credit for other people's ideas, watched him manipulate board presentations to erase contributors, watched him destroy careers when people pushed back. Amanda's voice was steady but angry. I kept copies of everything, emails, memos, meeting notes. I told myself I'd need them someday if he ever came after me, but I never thought I'd actually use them. Why are you calling now? Because I saw the indictment, saw him getting arrested, and I realized I have a choice. I can keep hiding, keep protecting myself, or I can help make sure he never does this to anyone else. She paused. I have documentation of 17 separate instances where Victor claimed other people's work as his own, including yours. I have the original founding documents that show you as an equal partner. I have emails where Victor explicitly discusses how to minimize Reed's historical role in company materials. Marcus's hand was shaking. Can you send me everything? I'm meeting with your lawyer tomorrow. I'm prepared to testify. And Mr. Reed? Thank you for having the courage to fight back. The rest of us were too scared. The call ended. Marcus sat very still, felt the weight of what was happening. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every person Victor had crushed, every contributor he'd erased, every career he'd destroyed in his relentless pursuit of singular credit and power. The next 6 weeks moved with surreal speed. Discovery began in earnest. David and his team deposed 17 current and former Hale Industries employees. Every single one corroborated the pattern of credit theft and contributor erasure. 3 broke down crying during their depositions, describing years of watching their work attributed to Victor while they remained invisible. Marcus's own deposition took 3 days. Victor's lawyers attacked from every angle, questioned his motives, his methods, his mental stability, implied he was running an elaborate extortion scheme funded by litigation investors who stood to profit from Hale Industries' destruction. Marcus answered every question calmly. Precisely. Let the evidence speak for itself. On day 2 of his deposition, Victor's lead attorney, a shark named Harrison Webb, leaned forward with predatory intensity. Mr. Reed, isn't it true that you infiltrated Hale Industries under false pretenses specifically to manufacture evidence for this lawsuit? I took a job under an assumed name to access areas where I could observe and document ongoing intellectual property theft. The evidence wasn't manufactured. It was collected from sources that executives had discarded because they assumed cleaning staff were too insignificant to matter. You committed fraud to gain employment. I used a different name. The references were legitimate. The work was performed as contracted. No fraud occurred. You violated privacy expectations by collecting confidential documents. I collected materials from trash receptacles, legally abandoned property. Any privacy expectation ended when those documents were thrown away. Webb shifted tactics. You've been funding this lawsuit through litigation investors who stand to profit if you win. Doesn't that create a financial incentive to make exaggerated or false claims? My claims are supported by documentary evidence, testimony from multiple witnesses, and an SEC indictment based on independent investigation. The source of my legal funding doesn't change the facts. But it does change your motivations. You're not seeking justice, Mr. Reed. You're seeking a payout. Marcus met Webb's eyes, kept his voice level. I'm seeking recognition for work I did 15 years ago. I'm seeking accountability for a man who built an empire on stolen credit. If that comes with financial compensation, fine, but the money isn't why I'm here. Then why are you here? Because Victor Hale erased me from history, and I refuse to stay erased. The deposition continued for another 6 hours. By the end, Marcus was exhausted, but he'd held his ground. David called that evening. You did great. Webb tried every trick in the book, and you didn't break. The jury's going to see that video and know you're telling the truth. When's Victor's deposition? Next week. And Marcus? He's going to have to testify about everything. The offshore accounts, the credit theft, the systematic erasure, all of it, under oath. Marcus felt a savage satisfaction. I want to be there. You have every right. I'll make sure you have a front row seat. Victor's deposition was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in a conference room that felt designed for corporate warfare. Polished table, leather chairs, recording equipment set up to capture every word. Victor arrived exactly on time, flanked by Harrison Webb and 2 junior attorneys. He looked thinner than Marcus remembered, older. The stress was showing in the tight lines around his mouth and the careful way he moved, as if any sudden gesture might shatter something fragile. Their eyes met across the conference room. Victor's expression was pure hatred, cold, controlled, absolute. Marcus stared back, didn't blink, didn't look away. This was the moment he'd been waiting for, the moment when Victor Hale would have to answer for everything under penalty of perjury. David began the questioning methodically, established Victor's role in the company, his relationship with Marcus, the early days of the business. Then he moved to the critical questions. Mr. Hale, who wrote the core encryption algorithms that formed the foundation of Hale Industries' first security product? Victor's jaw tightened. That was a collaborative effort. Who specifically wrote the code? Multiple contributors working under my direction. Was Marcus Reed one of those contributors? He did some programming work, yes. Some programming work. Can you quantify that? What percentage of the original codebase did Mr. Reed write? Webb interjected. Objection. Calls for speculation. My client can't be expected to remember precise percentages from 15 years ago. David smiled. Let me rephrase. Mr. Hale, we have the original source code repository with commit logs showing author attribution. Those logs show that Marcus Reed wrote 87% of the first release code. Does that number surprise you? Victor shifted in his seat. The commit logs don't tell the whole story. I provided direction. architecture, strategic vision. The code was implementing my concepts. So you're saying Mr. Reed was essentially a typist, taking your ideas and converting them to code? I'm saying software development is more than just writing code. It requires vision, leadership, business strategy. Marcus contributed technically, I contributed everything else. David pulled out a document. This is an email you sent to your general counsel 8 years ago. I'm going to read a portion. The Reed encryption protocols are still the backbone of our platform. Legal thinks we're exposed if he ever challenges the original settlement. Mr. Hale, why would you be exposed if Mr. Reed challenged the settlement? Webb started to object, but Victor waved him off. Because Reed was always litigious, always claiming he deserved more credit than he'd earned. I was concerned he might file a frivolous lawsuit, which is exactly what he's done. But you specifically referenced the Reed encryption protocols. Why use his name if these were collaborative efforts? Internal shorthand doesn't mean anything. David pulled out another document. Here's another email. This one to your engineering team. Going forward, all documentation should refer to legacy Hale systems, not Reed protocols. We need to standardize our language. Why did you want to erase Mr. Reed's name from internal documentation? I wanted consistent branding. Company systems should be attributed to the company, not individuals. Even when those individuals created the systems? Even then. David let that hang in the air. Then he shifted topics. Mr. Hale, let's talk about the offshore accounts. Did you create shell companies to hide revenue from shareholders and regulators? Webb stood up. We're not answering questions related to the criminal case. Fifth Amendment. David nodded. Fair enough. Let me ask this instead. Did you ever instruct employees to misrepresent the origins of company technology in materials presented to the board or investors? Fifth Amendment. Did you ever deliberately exclude Mr. Reed's name from company history materials, despite knowing he was a co-founder? Fifth Amendment. David asked 17 more questions. Victor pled the fifth to all of them. By the end of the deposition, the transcript was devastating. A CEO refusing to answer basic questions about company operations and history. An executive unable to defend the most fundamental aspects of his business without incriminating himself. Marcus watched it all with cold satisfaction. This was Victor Hale without his mythology, without his press conferences and TED Talks and carefully crafted image. Just a man who'd built an empire on lies and was now drowning in the consequences. After the deposition, David pulled Marcus aside. That was a disaster for them. Victor basically admitted guilt by refusing to answer. The jury's going to see that and draw their own conclusions. When's the trial? Judge set it for October 15th, 6 months from now. That gives us time to prepare, line up our witnesses, refine our presentation. David paused. Marcus, I think we're going to win this. I really do. Marcus wanted to believe him, but 6 months was a long time. A lot could happen. And Victor Hale wasn't finished yet. The counterattack came 3 weeks later. A media blitz orchestrated by Victor's PR team, interviews with sympathetic journalists, op-eds in business publications questioning Marcus's motives and methods. A carefully edited video montage suggesting Marcus was an unstable obsessive who'd spent years planning revenge. The narrative was simple and effective. Marcus Reed was the real villain, a con artist who'd infiltrated a legitimate company, stolen confidential information, and was now using litigation funding to wage economic warfare against a successful businessman. Some of it gained traction. Social media split along predictable lines. Business conservatives defended Victor. Tech progressives supported Marcus. Everyone else just enjoyed the spectacle. But something unexpected happened. The engineers started speaking up. Not just Jason Chen and his father, dozens of current and former Hale Industries employees began sharing their stories publicly. The patterns of credit theft, the toxic work culture, the systematic erasure of contributors. One former employee created a website documenting every instance of Victor claiming others' work. The site went viral. Within a week, it had cataloged 47 separate cases across 12 years. The narrative shifted. This wasn't about one disgruntled ex-employee. It was about a systemic pattern of exploitation. Media coverage shifted accordingly. Articles that had been sympathetic to Victor became more critical. Journalists started digging into the company's history, finding more evidence of the pattern Marcus had exposed. By June, public opinion had turned decisively against Victor Hale. His criminal trial was scheduled for July. Marcus's civil trial would follow in October. But in July, something unexpected happened. Harrison Webb called David with a settlement offer. Not from the board, from Victor, personally. "My client is prepared to offer complete capitulation," Webb said during a conference call with both legal teams. "Full recognition of Mr. Reed as co-founder, attribution on all patents and historical materials, a public apology, and a cash payment of $75 million. Marcus, listening on speakerphone, felt his breath catch. David responded carefully. "In exchange for what?" "Dismissal of the civil lawsuit with prejudice. No admission of wrongdoing beyond what's already stated in the settlement terms, and Mr. Reed's agreement not to testify in the criminal trial." There it was. The real ask. Victor wanted Marcus silenced before the criminal trial. "That's a non-starter," David said immediately. "Mr. Reed has been subpoenaed by the prosecution. He's testifying whether your client likes it or not. The subpoena could be challenged. We could argue his testimony is prejudicial given the pending civil litigation." "You could argue that. You'd lose, but you could try." David looked at Marcus, who shook his head firmly. "My client has no interest in a settlement that compromises the criminal prosecution. Victor Hale needs to face the full consequences of his actions." Webb tried several more angles. Raised the offer to $90 million, suggested creative structures for the public apology. Offered to resign from all positions in the tech industry permanently. But Marcus's answer remained the same. No settlement that protected Victor from criminal accountability. The call ended with Webb promising to consider all options and David hanging up with barely disguised satisfaction. "He's desperate," David said. "The criminal trial starts in 3 weeks, and he knows your testimony is going to destroy him. He's willing to pay almost anything to keep you off that witness stand." "Let him be desperate. I'm testifying." And he did. On July 23rd, Marcus Reed took the witness stand in federal court and spent 6 hours methodically dismantling Victor Hale's defense. He walked the jury through the stolen code, the offshore accounts, the systematic fraud, the 15 years of lies and erasure. Victor's criminal defense attorney tried to shake him on cross-examination, attacked his credibility, his motives, his methods. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Victor Hale was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, ordered to pay $87 million in restitution and fines, permanently banned from serving as an officer or director of any public company. Marcus sat in the courtroom and watched Victor led away in handcuffs. Watched the man who'd stolen his company, his credit, his 15 years finally face real consequences. And felt absolutely nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just emptiness. David noticed. "You okay?" "I thought I'd feel different, watching him lose everything." Justice isn't always satisfying. Sometimes it's just necessary. The civil trial, scheduled for October, became unnecessary. With Victor convicted criminally, the board immediately settled. Full recognition as co-founder. Marcus's name on all patents, $90 million in compensation, a public apology from the company acknowledging the wrongs done to him. Marcus accepted, not because the money mattered, but because the fight was over. 3 months later, he stood in the lobby of what was now called Reed Hale Industries, his name restored to the building, his story acknowledged in the company's official history. The marble floors gleamed the same way they had the night he'd been on his knees with a mop. But everything else had changed. Rita found him there, standing in the empty atrium at midnight. "I heard they're offering you a position on the board," she said. Marcus turned. "They are. I haven't decided." "You should take it. Make sure they never forget what happened here. Or I could walk away, take the money, start fresh somewhere else." Rita smiled. "You didn't go through all this to walk away. You went through this to be seen, to be acknowledged, to matter." She was right. Marcus accepted the board position, used his voice to completely restructure how the company attributed credit and recognized contributors, established a whistleblower fund for employees who exposed wrongdoing, changed the culture from the inside. Jason Chen and his father both stayed with the company, rose through the ranks based on merit and properly acknowledged contributions. Amanda Foster came back as VP of Ethics and Compliance. The 17 engineers who testified became advocates for proper attribution in the tech industry, starting a movement that spread far beyond one company. And Marcus Reed, who'd spent 3 months invisible as a janitor, became permanently visible as the co-founder who'd refused to stay erased. 1 year after Victor's conviction, Marcus stood at a podium during the company's annual meeting and addressed shareholders for the first time in 15 years. "I want to tell you about a night last year," he began. "A night when I was on my knees in this building, cleaning a floor that didn't need cleaning, while 200 people watched a billionaire humiliate someone he thought was beneath him." The room was silent. That billionaire thought he was demonstrating power, but what he actually demonstrated was the fundamental truth about empires built on theft. They're fragile. They crack when pressure is applied, and they fall when the people they've crushed decide to stand up. Marcus paused, looked around the room at faces that now knew his name, his story, his worth. This company was built on brilliant technology created by people whose names deserve to be remembered. Moving forward, we're going to make sure every contributor gets credit. Every innovation gets proper attribution. Every voice gets heard. Because that's how you build something that lasts, not through erasure and exploitation, but through recognition and respect. The applause started slowly, then built, then became a standing ovation that lasted 3 minutes. Marcus stood there and finally felt what he'd been chasing for 15 years. Not revenge, not even justice. Recognition, the simple, powerful acknowledgement that he mattered, that his work mattered, that he existed and could not be erased. He'd been invisible for so long, had scrubbed floors and collected evidence and fought through depositions and trials and media storms. But now, standing in the light of complete vindication, Marcus Reed was finally, permanently seen. And Victor Hale, in his federal prison cell, would spend the next 12 years knowing exactly what he'd lost and who had taken it back. The floor beneath him had always been solid. Victor had just never bothered to look down and notice who'd built it. But Marcus had built it well. And when the time came, he'd known exactly how to pull it out from under Victor's feet. Justice was cold. Justice was slow. Justice was expensive and exhausting and sometimes hollow. But justice in the end was exactly what Marcus Reed had earned. And he walked out of that shareholders' meeting into a future where his name would never be forgotten again.